Science doesn't prove God.
True. Science can only prove things that are, real. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. Today we're talking to David Hasselhoff. No, wait. Make that pushing limits. And if his idea of how science works and what atheism is are common among theists, it seems the rest of us have a lot of work to do to correct these misconceptions. Here we go.
Let's take it back. Let's say in the years before Christ, the BC years, alright? Whatever you call it. They say that the Greek philosopher Aristotle argued that Earth was round, not flat like the common misconception. So before Aristotle or anybody else made these predictions, was the Earth flat?
No, it wasn't. But before people started using science to explain the inexplicable, was the common misconception that God did it accurate?
Because, technically, according to atheistic reasoning, there's no science to prove something at this time. It does not exist.
Oh boy. That is not atheistic reasoning, and I don't know where you got the idea that it is, but I'd recommend not listening to them anymore. The real reasoning is this. If there is no evidence for something, then the claim that it exists is without basis. Why should anybody believe in your God if the only reason you give for us to do so is faith? Even if God does exist, which seems awfully unlikely to the point of being ridiculous, why should anybody think he does if you cannot show him to us?
This is ignorance at its finest. What makes our science so advanced? What makes us so knowledgeable all of a sudden? We are nothing really in the grand scheme of things.
But are you really willing to trust superstitious Bronze Age ignoramuses whose understanding of the universe could be rivaled by your average modern 10-year-old? I mean, really, which do you think is more likely? The people who didn't know physics, astronomy, meteorology, etc. made up magical shit to explain it all, or that there really is a God who decided to go into hiding just as humanity started being smart enough to realize that natural disasters had natural causes instead of being God's vengeance, and that the Great Flood wouldn't have been possible without Noah's Ark being a TARDIS with a genetics lab. Figure that one out. Take your time. I'll wait.
Think of it like this. You visit a beautiful, massive beach. You pick up one little grain of sand. One little grain of sand. You know what that grain of sand is? That's our Earth, our massive planet that we have not even fully discovered and explored and understood yet. Our knowledge and science cannot even fully understand this tiny grain of sand, yet we feel the privilege to be able to make assumptions about a whole beach.
Well, those grains of sand, they're awfully similar to one another. And we can learn quite a lot about them by studying our own little grain, and what we can see of the others even just with our limited reach from here. We know a hell of a lot more about that beach than you give us credit for.
What makes even the greats in this world have any say on what is out there?
Telescopes.
After all, we're just human. There's so many unexplained phenomena in this universe.
True. But you religious jokers claim that God has actually shown up on Earth. He's not just out in the universe somewhere. He's telling people to kill their sons, or giving them commandments, both at the tops of mountains for some reason, figure that one out, turning women into condiment statues for the crime of curiosity, and all manner of other magical stunts, none of which we see happen today when we actually have a far better understanding of the universe. This isn't a question about what's out there. This is a question of whether you theists can back up your scripture stories with facts.
Our understanding of this world is constantly changing. Science is improving constantly. New theories are being made. Just because we cannot prove or disprove something at the moment does not mean it does not exist or is unrealistic.
But that doesn't mean that it does exist either. And as for unrealistic, what you're basically saying here is that if we cannot disprove God, then we have to take the idea of one seriously. Newsflash, Chester. No, we don't. What we have to take seriously, what we have to consider realistic, is that which has evidence to back it up, that gives us a reason to suspect that it might be true. There is no more evidence for God than there is for wizards or vampires, and the idea of a magical, universe-creating, virgin-impregnating, sun-sacrificing prayer merchant is just as nutty, if not more so, than beanstalks with castles at the top. So unless you've got a really convincing reason to even think God might be real, calling the idea unrealistic isn't just something we can do, it's something we should do.
Saying that a God is unrealistic is equivalent to saying that visiting the moon is unrealistic back before it was made possible.
No, it isn't. For starters, we know the moon is there. That's kind of a vital first step.
Let's say that there is a God that is a higher power out there, okay? So according to atheists, they say, why doesn't this God show us he exists? But then again, wouldn't that defeat his entire purpose? That would be no different than giving a test to students and halfway through, just giving them the answers because they kept asking.
No, it'd be like students going to class and having the teacher actually show up to teach them stuff.
Then their grades wouldn't even be reflective of anything because they were just given them.
Christians claim that we're being judged by our behavior, on whether we've sinned. But apparently, if what you say is true, we're also being tested on how willing we are to take seriously claims that cannot be verified. In other words, half the test is actually on whether we agree to be deliberately gullible. And any God who demands that of me is a God I want nothing to do with. That God is an asshole.
If we were told straightforwardly that yes, a God or higher power exists, then what test of faith will we have? What determinant of good in a person's heart would there be?
Why does there even need to be a test in the first place? I mean, if we're complete jerkwads to other people, they'll shun us. If we murder or steal, we get locked up. These things are built into the human world. We have empathy and we have self-interest, a sense of community, friends, and family. We test ourselves. We punish those who misbehave, protect ourselves from those who would hurt those we care about. All this, and no God required. So if the only reason your magical sky fairy is there to make us follow a bunch of rules while pretending he's not there, only giving us books that read like bad fantasy as the instruction manual, I reject him, both as unnecessary and for being a royal prick.
Now, before I get nasty comments saying the same could be said about religion, alright, let me say this. Yes, the same could be said about religion. Religion can be ignorant just as much as atheism can be ignorant, okay? So, this is simply stating how atheistic ideas are ignorant, and look at the bigger picture and not just what you think or what you see is true at the moment.
Most atheists want to correct their ignorance by gathering all the information they can, by learning. Theists, on the other hand, are told that they have to have faith to believe in God without reasonable amounts of info. In other words, religion actually enforces ignorance. So don't go trying to tell me that atheism is ignorant. Atheists aren't the ones who say, I didn't understand it, God did it.
No, we don't know everything. We know nothing. We don't even know our own planet.
And yet, somehow you're convinced a God exists. Makes perfect sense.
Really, the only viewpoint is that that's not ignorant is the agnostic viewpoint.
Actually, etymologically, ignorant is exactly what agnosticism is. The root word of agnostic is gnosis, which means knowledge, and the prefix a negates it. In other words, the literal meaning of agnostic is being without information, which is synonymous with ignorant.
So leave comments and responses below. If given a good enough argument, I will respond in my next video.
Oh yeah? Bring it on! Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think. Ignorance killed the cat. Curiosity was framed.